thought-provoking podcast that sheds light on the challenges faced by young people living in urban areas. We highlight the resilience and creativity of young leaders who are finding innovative ways to overcome the challenges our young people are facing, inspiring listeners to take action to support them. This is A Different Cloth.
What's going on, A Different Cloth family? We are back, Ep.4. We running and gunning now. I'm completely excited on the trajectory of the pod and where we're going. We went from once a month. Now we're gonna come, every 2 weeks now?
Every 2 weeks. Let's get it.
I think before we jump into a conversation, what we want to talk about today, and just want to ask how you doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm doing pretty good overall. I've been tired a lot lately. I just feel like it's been a busy season, and we've been going pretty hard. I'm grateful though. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining because I literally prayed for this day, and now that it's here, it's like, man, you don't want to complain about what you once prayed for, but it's about managing it and balancing. All the different things that we're doing. But overall, man, I feel really, really good about where we're at in life, this season, what it holds, all is well, man. How about you?
Yeah, I think for me, same. I think, I don't know, I think these past couple of months I kept praying for breakthrough and stuff. I think now my prayer has changed to Lord, just help me manage my highs and lows.
It's good.
Don't let me get too high, don't let me get too low, but just help me manage. If I'm going to be in this low season or in the valley, show me and teach me what it is to kind of be present in that. And then, when the highs come, make sure I do exactly what I need to do to maintain, structure, proper life with Christ, etc. I think on the outside of that, I think my kids are well, they're healthy.
Okay.
They're doing better. My wife she's good. I think the transition from New York to Cali is still pretty tough. It's still pretty evident for sure. But I think me and her, we're getting better at it.
Good.
Realistically,
it takes, I would say at least a year to fully transition to where it's like, hey, we're here, we're settled, things are moving forward. No transition is easy, no matter what. But then you factor in moving across the country with your family. That's a whole different type of transition that I think is going to take time for y'all to get acclimated and adjusted and feel good about where things are. And not to say you can't enjoy the process, but yeah, it's definitely going to take time.
Yeah, what's interesting, and not to sit too much on it. Recently we were hanging out with a mutual friend, and he was mentioning transition. And for some reason, I thought coming out here that not that I had to conform to everything that was out here, but essentially I had to do my part me and my wife, we had to do our part to push ourselves out there and meet new people and meet support systems and meet friends. But he said something that kind of had me mind blown in the sense of hey, if you're coming from one place to another, that place also has the responsibility of welcoming you in. And that was then I started looking at the different areas that I'm in and who's welcoming me in.
It's good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's real.
So
yeah, it's definitely it's great. Absolutely.
I said we could jump into this conversation.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's one that's near and dear to my heart.
Okay.
So, I don't know where to start. Where would you say we start?
Yeah, well, today I think we get a chance to look at life and ministry and in a lot of different contexts, church and nonprofit and the work we do. And I think there's one key ingredient that allows ministries to be successful. And let me go way back. Let me just kind of set the stage. I think from Genesis to Revelation, I don't think you'll ever look in Scripture and see a program or a church as we know it today, where it's you got a men's ministry, a women's ministry, whatever, youth ministry, kids ministry, you won't see program heavy, churches in Scripture.
Yeah.
But I'm also reminded of in the book of Acts where it talks about the followers of Jesus, and it says that, and these are the ones that turn the world upside down. And I think, man, today we're talking about presence over programs. And I think more than anything, it's not programs, churches, entities, nonprofits that change lives. It's people.
Okay.
And it's the presence of a person in the life of a person that ultimately allows God to use somebody to shift maybe an entire trajectory of another life of a person. Very rarely do you see, I mean, just take our Success Club. Do we have great conversations in there? 1,000%, right?
Yeah.
Is it a perfect formula for lives to be changed because the program is solid and spot on and we vetted it and we worked out every kink? And even if we did all of that, we wouldn't see 100% change. Right. And because it's always going to be people over programs. It's always going to be the presence of a person that ultimately changes lives. And so here we are.
What would you say, I'm ready, I'm running and gunning with questions now, let's go.
Yeah.
What would you say was that defining moment for you, or was it something that you always felt naturally, like, even I'm talking about even like from beginning of ministry, like, was that something that was always evident for you, or?
That's a really good question. No, and it wasn't in my life. A big part of my story is I feel like in a lot of my really, really dark, painful moments in life, I feel like I found myself alone and was trying to navigate how to process, where to go, what to do by myself. Because not to say I didn't have people around me, I don't feel like I had people present with me in the way that they could have been or should have been. So, you're right here next to me, so you're here. That doesn't always mean that you're here, right? And so in the middle of my mess, in the middle of my funk, I didn't have people here. And so for me, when I got into ministry, really when I moved to San Bernardino, we started working with students in the youth ministry. And I had some all-stars. I mean, we had some rough cases. And I just remember thinking, number one, I didn't want to burn out. So I kind of just created a rule. Hey, I got a 10 o'clock cutoff. My youth ministry professor taught me that. Like, you got to cut it off at some point because ministry is 24 hours and it's always going to run you ragged. Yeah. And so I said, I was single at the time. So I was like, I want to be married at some point. So, I want to create healthy rhythms. So 10 o'clock cutoff. And I told every student, I said, if you call me after 10, it better be an emergency. And I said, by emergency, I don't mean that she broke up with you. Because that's not an emergency. But I said, either the cops need to be on their way or you need to be on your way to the hospital. Yeah. But I said, if you call me after 10, call me twice because I'm going to ignore the first one on purpose. And I'll answer the second one. And I didn't think that I would need to actually follow through on that. And then it happened. I got a call 2 a.m. And my first response was like, they need somebody there with them. Yeah. Not with answers or with can I pray for you even? Not even that. They just need somebody there with them. And so I just, I feel like it just became a thing out of my own pain. I started showing up to courtrooms. Yeah. When they were on, guilty even. I'm there as a character witness with a letter. Hey, here's, because I'm just like, and I'm not even arguing are they guilty or not. Yeah. All I'm saying is, hey, this student is in my life and I value them, I believe in them, and I've seen growth or, so that type of thing. And so I just feel like, man, being around students that felt like they were always drowning, people need somebody to show up in the middle of their pain. And I wanted to be that representative of Jesus that does that.
I mean, I think if I can push in a little more, what would you say? I mean, the reality is, in this world that we live in, right? The Christian world, and even the ministry world, right? You get to meet a lot of leaders and a lot of people and networks and pastors, etc. But I don't know if I could pull out my phone and call someone or call a bunch of people that would pick up at 2 a.m. Like what made you do that? Or what made you say, all right, not only am I gonna pick up, but now I'm gonna leave my house and you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it was just a simple realization. You know, we call our org Rescue a Generation, and not because we conjured up this cute name. I think we talked about that before. But man, students are literally drowning in front of us every day. And we often don't respond until it's too late.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, man, students, if they're struggling, and the students that I worked with were, and it was evident, they were loud with their struggle. I remember they need somebody, obviously that's why you got to create the boundaries, right? So they're not calling you over everything, because students, they will call you over everything. And so I had to create the boundaries saying, like, it has to be an emergency. But if they're drowning, the only way they're going to survive is by somebody being in the water with them, helping them. I don't know that I had this, like, great philosophy behind it, or this, like, it was just like, yo, I'm going to roll my sleeves up and get in the trenches with students and just see what happens. And, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, but, like, when I look at my years as a youth pastor, on paper, it's hard to say that I was a successful youth pastor. Here's what I mean by that. I think I see other youth pastors that got kids in their youth ministry that go on to be youth pastors. Oh, you're called to ministry. Oh, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. I don't know that I have maybe one or two in the students that I walked with that are absolutely, like, living out their God call. Most of the other ones, I got students today that I know are doing, like, jail time and, like, but I just felt like on paper I wasn't successful, but showing up for them every single day, I was faithful. And you leave those results to God. Like, it's not our responsibility to manipulate results. It's our responsibility just to be faithful.
Yeah.
That I feel like I could say I was consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer the question?
No, it definitely does.
Yeah. I just don't have the cute answer of, like, oh, well, God spoke and it wasn't that. It was just like, man.
Yeah, from a theological perspective.
Right.
No, I get you. So for me, I would, if I answer the question too, I think I moved away from the basics, or not, like, when they that phrase, or get back to the basics kind of situation. I mean, I've always said it, right? You've heard me say it 1,000 times. Like, I'm a firm believer: be who you needed when you were younger.
Yeah.
I think as I started doing ministry more, I wanted to sit with kids since the beginning. I've always wanted to sit with kids. I've always wanted to be present, not only for kids, but their family, the community. I wanted to be present. I wanted to hear. I think as I don't want to call it the influence, right? But the scope got bigger.
Yeah.
I think I fell victim to, I don't want to call myself a victim. I think I fell in the trap of programs. I remember when somebody told me, like, oh, you can't do all these things. You're gonna tire yourself out.
Yeah.
I'm big on systems.
Yeah.
I'm big on systems, but mostly internal systems as opposed to external.
Sure.
And I think I was trying to create systems personally for an external ministry.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think what was happening was, I remember one guy told me, he was like, you just got to put things in place that people can lean on. That way it's not giving of yourself so much. And I don't know why I really ran with that. I don't really, I thought that was like, oh, that makes so much sense. But it was awful because I'm not saying that it doesn't work for people.
Sure.
I think it doesn't work for me. Because if you know the type of person I am, like, I need to be able to give completely. And I think that's one conversation me and my wife had where, she understands that this is the type of ministry that I've been called to, right? I think where it messed up was I started throwing a bunch of programs out there. And I think my expectation was that young people and their families were gonna commit to these programs or commit to these things just because I told them to. You know what I mean?
You were wrong.
And the weird part about it was like, I'm not gonna lie. The weird part about it was, I think I was okay with it. In a weird way. It's because I allowed myself to conform to that thought process of like, if you just work the program, you'll be fine. And I didn't really have to give of myself. It wasn't like, hey, we can talk over here, but you're not gonna know my wife, you're not gonna know my kids, you're not gonna know my family. I'm not gonna invite you in. I'm not gonna really like walk with you. And it's so weird because I was that when I first started.
Yeah.
But I think I guess I got easy influence. I don't know, but I hit a wall when I was working with this young dude. He was released. I was working with him on the inside when we were serving together, and then he was released. And I remember telling him, "Man, just stay committed to the programs that we put, the resources that they're all there for you." And I literally couldn't see him crying out for me. I couldn't see him crying out for anybody.
Yeah.
And we were just like, because we got to manage all these kids, we got to manage all these families and all these departments and areas. And it was just like, hey, if you just show up to the program, you know what I mean? There's some wonderful people there that'll take care of you and all these things. And he would call me and he would text me and I'd get back to him like a week later or a day later. And I'm admitting this horrible thing that I feel like I've done. And I remember I texted him because he didn't show up to group. Text him in September. He didn't answer. I texted him like 2 more times in September. He didn't answer. I texted him one time in October. But you would think that would already get me to get up and be like, where's this kid at?
Yeah.
But I was just so worried about like, putting other things in place.
You had other things in place.
And I remember on Christmas Eve, I was sitting with my wife. I got a call. And they were like, hey, such and such person got rearrested.
Dang.
And they sent me a link to whatever he had done.
Dang.
And I felt at that specific moment, it destroyed my Christmas, first of all.
Sure, I bet.
But in that moment, I felt I failed. I failed. And it was like such a gut-punching experience where I was like, I don't know, instantly, I didn't say, man, he didn't work the program. I said, I failed him.
Yeah.
And I sat there for like 2 hours just like in awe, like, wow, this kid's now about to do hard time when he spent his last couple months out constantly texting me and writing me, just wanting to be around me. And I just kept telling him, work the program, just work the program.
Yeah.
Just show up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, you need an Uber? I'll Uber you to the program.
Yeah.
Thinking that's like, oh, I'm present. I just offered you an Uber.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
I got some thoughts.
Go ahead, let's go.
I want to challenge. Can I challenge your perspective just a tad?
Sure.
Because my thought goes to this. Let's say things were different, and you stayed present. Okay. There's still no guarantee that he doesn't go and get arrested again, right? So there's no way you can like factually be like, if I was there every single day, that would not have happened, right? So the first thing. Second thing is, to what you talked about being the one that's always there and giving your all and things like that, to what end? And then to how many, right? Because obviously the more things grow, the harder it is to become that for everybody. And so even Jesus modeled it, right? Like he had the 3, he had the 12, he had the 72, and then he had the multitudes, right? But he didn't give the 3 what he gave the 12. And he didn't give the 12 what he gave the 72. Yeah. So how he modeled what he gave to who was drastically different. So I say that for this one reason.
Oh, yeah, we're about to argue, but go ahead.
No, it's great. I'm ready for it. I say that for this one reason. This whole conversation that programs don't change lives, people do, right? One of the things that I think, if I was in hindsight, listen, obviously I've made plenty of ministry mistakes that I know you could easily speak into, and I could go back and be like, man, if I would have done it differently. RAG, I'll use RAG for example. I've never had an issue with a student that I felt like I couldn't handle in a sense. Not to say I was perfect, and not to say like I always saw a turnaround story or anything like that.
Yeah.
But there was never anything that was like, oh, I just can't handle that, right? I mean, literally from the most rebellious, whatever. But as we created the success clubs, okay, and we started to send other people to run the programs, I would hear stories about students that some of our team couldn't handle.
Yeah.
And it would kind of baffle me a little bit, because I was like, I've never been in a position where I couldn't handle a kid, no matter what the case has been. Not to say that there never would be a kid that I can't handle, because there may be at some point, right? But like for me, that's all. And I've worked with some real like tough students. I say that because I realized the Success Club is not what's going to change the life of these students, but the more I pour into the people that is running the Success Club, the more I can develop them, the more I can, what Jethro told Moses, to impart your spirit into the 70 elders, right? Like the more I can do that, the better off these Success Club and students will be, because they're going to have somebody consistently in their life. And so thinking back to your time, you're right. And you do give a lot. I could tell just in the few months that we've known each other, right? Like you're that type. You invite people into your space. You know, like you're very much I would say the incarnational ministry type of person, which is like, we're going to do this thing together. But I also think, how many can you do that with?
Everybody.
Cap.
Fully
cap.
All right, so this is where we fight. Move the mics. Start fist fighting. No. All right, so I don't know listen, I cannot get to everyone. I will admit that. But the attitude of trying is what I would never let go of. And I think we've spent a lot of time being okay with this mediocre attitude of, I can't get to everybody. And that's become a norm. That could never be a norm for me. Like, even if I go statistically, in New York City, where I was at, right? So I could only talk about New York City. When a kid gets arrested, there is a 50% chance, black and brown kids, there's a 50% chance that kid gets rearrested.
Yep.
If he's arrested a second time, there's a 65% chance he's rearrested for the third time.
Yep.
They say if he's arrested for the third time, there's an 86% chance he'll do hard time.
Yeah.
Right? Now, this, for me, is, okay, if I see the statistic, I can't destroy this whole thing in one shot.
Yep.
But I can be a piece, and I feel like if we all work this way, I'm no different, I'm no special, but if we all work this way, and how does that work, right? When we wrote to the judge and we said, hey man, we want to walk with this kid, we know he made a mistake, blah blah. They allowed him to be released. He walked with us for an entire year, and I went back to the basics, and I switched up and I said, hey, you're having Sunday dinner with me and my family. You're hanging out with me and my kids. You're going to meet my kids. You're going to see what life is beyond your 4-block radius. Like,
yep.
You know, and not only that, I'm going to be intentional about introducing you to other people who are this way. That it's not just me. And I think he hasn't been back since. And he texts me every week, and I'm all the way in Cali, but he's become a part of my life. And I'd be lying if I told you it was just him. It's 1,000 other kids. No, I'm not 1,000.
No, yeah, I got you.
But there's a bunch of other kids who, I pick up, you know, and
yeah.
Not only that, it's a lifestyle. And I refuse to be one of those people who says, like, you can't do it, or you can't be in it, or you can't move that way. Like, I don't know. I tried your way, and that didn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
That made me fail from my perspective.
Okay.
I tried that way, not specifically your way, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I tried that way. Like now, like I think I'm gonna be the person that God designed me to be with each kid. So I can't save 1,000 kids, but if you cross my path, we're doing something together. You know what I mean? If you cross my path, we're doing something together. And I remember this one mentor that I had when I'm going off. My bad.
You're good.
I remember this one mentor that I had, and he was such a good dude. Like I knew him. He did life with me, right? And I remember when I first started doing ministry, he gave me a hard like punch, and he says, you know, not one man can change the world, right? So almost like a slow down or like realize you can't do it all or whatever. I literally stopped talking to him after that day. Like I didn't care on the impact he had in my life. I didn't care about, for me, you're trying to push me away from me. And I know I can't change the world. But if I walk into a room with that attitude, I'm never gonna be able to do anything that God wants me to do.
I'm with you on that 100%. All right, you ready? Because I'm coming for you. Okay. All right, a couple thoughts I have. Number one, in reference to these students that still reach out to you. Okay. I wonder now. And I want to just really preface this by saying, number one, I fully think you were faithful with what God gave you, and I'm not taking shots at that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to be really clear about that.
Yeah.
But I do want to just challenge the mentality a little bit, because what if your faithfulness to them became a crutch for them? What if Angel is the only person they could go to from here until the end now, because you were the only person that developed that relationship to them, the only person that believed, the only person that cared, and then they don't want to talk to anybody else but Angel? I would say that's dangerous. I would say that could be unhealthy, right? And I would say that could even, I'm not saying you did this, but that could even take away from them needing Jesus as much as they need Angel.
Yeah.
That's problematic in and of itself, right? At the same time, the other thought of this is, I don't think, you know, when I talk about training people, there are people that have the heart, right? The skills, or at least the wherewithal. Maybe they don't have the skills yet, right? Or they have the background. So you have all these students or young people that you journeyed with. Man, my thought, Angel, would be the way Angel stays in New York and lives in California is by pouring my all into these group so that they can become my representative in New York still.
Yeah.
Because I would trust, particularly if you walked with the person, I would trust them probably more than I would trust some random dude that's just trying to volunteer or do something like that, right?
Yeah.
So how do you raise people up? Again, it goes back to the model of Jesus. The church, the early church in the New Testament, knew about Jesus not only because they saw him, but because of the people that he developed and raised up.
Yeah.
To leave that when Rescue a Generation is, and I feel like God showed me this when I was in college. When Rescue a Generation is all said and done, we'll rephrase that. When Jose is all said and done, I fully believe there's still going to be students that are being rescued. Because I developed people to keep rescuing people.
Yeah.
In college, I had a dance team, and we was doing our thing, and we was trying to do these like big events, and you know mass crusades in other countries, right? Like I've been to a couple of those, and like sometimes you can see 1 million people there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, on a good day, if I danced at a mass crusade, saw 1 million people, I could, and share the gospel, right? Or share my story, I could reach 1 million people. But the way I'll maximize my impact to go beyond 1 million
Yeah.
is by training others how to do what I do well.
Yeah.
And to me, I think there's a way to do both. To both pull in those that God is calling you to, because that I don't want to undersell. There's a people that God calls us to pour in, to disciple, to walk with, right? But then there's also those that God wants us to raise up to be the ones that are in turn doing the work. And for me, I think that's the part that if you could have been intentional about that, and I'm not talking about just with some random adults.
Yeah.
I'm talking about with the young people that you helped. If you would have raised them up, they could have been you in New York right now, still doing it, still writing letters to judges, still like, just with that mentality of saying like, I want to do that.
Well, see, the thing is, I do want them to follow me and only me. No, I'm joking. I mean, the thing is, one, I'm also not a person that's going to give you my success stories. I'm not going to give you this resume of all the kids that, right? But that's just, the reality is, I think it's more mindset than the actual action. So, for example, and this probably to my detriment, if I'm going by what you're saying, my mindset will always to be go above and beyond. It's just, I think
that's not a bad mindset,
right? And I think the act, and I'll be honest, I think the act from my growth, if I looked at the trajectory of my growth, in the beginning, I didn't know how to talk to a kid. I just said, "Hey, I did that too. Don't do this. Do what I did." I think that conversation has changed, and not necessarily giving my story, but giving Jesus' story, and why Jesus saved my life and had mercy on my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why the same for you, right? But I think it's also like important, and I had to realize, hey, there's so many other dope people out here, and it's trial and error. Because I remember telling some of these young guys, like, man, yo, I'm gonna introduce you to this guy, like he's super cool, blah blah blah, and then that guy goes to that kid. Yep. I'm like, I'm gonna have to do this myself.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But the reality is, I think being very intentional on who I've brought young people around, but then also like who can really. Let's be real. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know if people are gonna like me for this.
Let's do it.
But not everyone can do what we're doing. That's just the reality of it. You can do some aspects of it. You can desire to do it, but there's like a.
Let me ask then. I got to ask the question: what determines if somebody can or can't do it? And I have a real reason why I'm asking this question. I don't fully disagree with you because I've seen people not be able to do it. So I can't be like, nah, anybody can do this work, right? At the same time, I've seen people that I feel like shouldn't have been able to do it, be able to do it and do it well. Like well. And so what determines?
For me, right? For me, it's the heart that God has given you for that specific group. And I think anytime I've ever met anyone, whether it be white, black, Asian, Hispanic, anytime I've ever met anybody do urban ministry well, they've always led with their heart.
Okay, I'm in full agreement with that. I do think God can break somebody's heart. I just want to, we got to be careful a little bit because it can very much sound like only people that come from where we've come from can reach those students. I'm not saying you're saying that, but I'm just saying, I think by just the tone sometimes can come off like, well, maybe if we're not like that. And I don't think you have to relate to reach.
Yeah.
I do think you have to have a heart. I think, and I would say this, more than a heart, you have to have a burden. Like something about this almost has to make you weep.
Yeah.
Like make you frustrated enough to want to be able to get in the trenches and do something about it. And so I would say that's vital. But I mean, I was discipled by a middle-aged Caucasian lady who had nothing in common with me. Same. So that's why I just try to be careful about that. Because there's probably people that listen probably ain't got nothing in common with some urban youth in their area. And what we're trying to tell is like, yo, you need to be burdened by what's breaking them or what's hurting them or what's harming them, sin or poverty or whatever, or gangs, violence, whatever. But it's not to say that you can't reach them if you don't have the story like them or if you're not from where they're from.
No, not
but
at
you
all.
gotta have the heart.
Not at all.
1,000%.
I mean, one of the first people that impacted my life was a 55, 56-year-old white lady.
Yep.
And she came through. She didn't, we were nothing similar. She grew up in a different neighborhood. She grew up in a different era. And she showed me how to be a young man.
Come on.
She showed me how to be a young man. Mind you, she only had daughters.
Yeah.
And she said, hey, pick up your pants. This is how you write a resume. Like, hey, listen, I'm going to do a mock interview with you. This is how you speak. Like, she really took
hard.
the time out. And I don't know why she did it.
Yeah.
But I never knew who she was. I mean, I knew who she was, but personally, I didn't know much about her life. She didn't really invite me into her life. But it doesn't mean that she still didn't have a heart for me. Just because she didn't share my story doesn't mean that she still didn't have a heart for me.
And even if she didn't invite you into her life, it sounds like she was still present in yours.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
She still showed up for you. She still cared about the things that bothered you. And I think that's really the whole point of this, right? Is like, we create systems and programs for one reason, to equip people to help others walk through the process or the program, right? Our Success Club is a process of conversations that we're having with students. And I think we can look at it and say, well, okay, the Success Club is successful in nature, right? But it's not successful because it's a good program. It's successful because we've trained people to do what that lady did for you.
Yeah.
Show up. Be consistent.
Yeah.
Ask questions. Be concerned. Care. Love students, right? I love what one of our team members, Isaiah, says. He was like, I asked him recently, I was like, Isaiah, what are you learning right now about Success Clubs? You've been at this a year now, and he said, I love that, the Success Clubs are going well. In the group context, he said, we're doing a lot of great things in those group discussions. He said, but there's nothing like the one-on-one.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that. I'm going to get in. I want to get to know you a little bit. And we've seen it even at Corona, the school we're in, where if we pull a kid in before class or after class and just show them that undeniable time and we're present, we're here, man, their openness and even students that we feel like may not be receptive to us, they become receptive because of our presence more than the program, right? And so, man, ultimately, I think anybody can reach urban students, but you got to understand in any context, any ministry context.
Yeah,
it's always going to be people that reach people. From Genesis to Revelation, God always used people.
So can you teach the heart of it? Because the reality is, right, even if I'm going by what you're saying, right, I've met people now give the same response, ask the same questions, do the same tricks of the trade when it comes to speaking to someone, literally identical, but you can tell when someone's heart is not in it.
What a great point, 1,000%.
So the reality is, it's like, you can give me the script, but if my heart, what's our main thing that we lead with? Vulnerability.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That requires heart to do. You know what I mean? And just be real. I've met people who come into the jail, and they're good people. They're good at messages and all that other stuff, right? But when they come in, one mistake that they always do, oh man, I was just like you when I was a kid.
I hate that, bro.
Right?
Oh, I despise it.
But I'm like, hey, just be yourself, bro. They just want somebody to love on them.
You ain't even
right.
Yeah.
But then here's the thing: they just want somebody to love on them. Now let me go back to my notes and see what's the right response to say to something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think I've seen too much of that.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like not everybody can do it.
I don't.
You can, I mean, maybe on a smaller scale, maybe on some like, but I honestly feel like the driving force of it is not someone who's just reading off a script.
I fully agree with that statement. I don't know that you can teach heart. I do know you can see where a broken heart is. And I think ultimately, if we're going to be the type of people that remain in trenches with young people, it's going to be because God breaks our heart for what breaks His about this particular group. And so you're right, man. I think people can come in with all the right words and gimmicks and tricks and tools of the trade and the whole nine yards and but ultimately if you're not broken, if your heart is not broken by what you're seeing to the point where you want to get in and just be with and help, there's no way I think you're going to be effective in that, which is why I've seen so many people in ministry be able to perform really, really well. But that be it.
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled with the lights of it all and the cameras of it all and the playing the right chords to emotionally get kids to. I've struggled with all of that because at the end of the day, I've personally seen the cycle of kids be in a church, they grow up and they transition out, and then a bunch of new kids come in, and it's like this constant cycle. And I feel like it's almost like we want these things, right? We want to be able to love kids and serve kids and their families and communities and stuff like that. But it's like, I think the heart, right? And I don't want to lean too much on the heart, but I think the tapping in, like spiritually, I think tapping into that is what makes you say, how can I do this better? You know what I mean? How can I be intentional?
Yeah.
How can I multiply myself?
Yeah.
All of that is like, it's because you care. It's because the burden. It's because you feel the weight. You know what I mean? Like me saying, you know what? I know I can't manage 100 kids. You know, like let's be real. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I learned ministry the very, very hard way. I didn't go to seminary. I didn't go to, Bible college. I didn't do any of these things. I came from a small Spanish church that didn't really know much about much. The reality is I wasn't able to get around a Jose. I know we're the same age, similar, but
Sure.
But there was no blueprint. There was no like, hey, this is I see you have like the heart for it, or I see that God has given you a burden for these, like this is how you do things.
Yeah.
So now my question to you is, because we're going back and forth and I'm admitting a lot of my flaws.
Yeah.
But one thing is I'm never giving up, right?
Yeah.
So from my young age of starting ministry to now, it's like I want to get better. Like I think that's something I've always tell you. Like I want to learn, I want to ask questions, I want to get better because I want to do this life better with people, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who are listening who, all right, they do feel burdened, but they don't know, like, do I have to give of myself? Is it like a 9-to-5 situation? Is it a lifestyle? And not only that, like, what would be, like, where would you start then? You know what I mean? Because even I know you weren't talking directly to me, but even if I was that person, then what do you tell that person at the young age?
It's good.
19, 20 years old. Hey, I see you doing this. Maybe try this.
Yeah, let me say this. I think, God gives each person a grace to do what it is they are called to do. And a big part of, Angel, why our heart is broken the way it is for who it is because God's graced us for a people. There are other people that God's given a grace for that isn't going to reach urban students. Yeah. And we have to learn to celebrate that and honor that, right? That's what makes the body of Christ so beautiful. In the same context, that's why I would say first thing is you got to find what breaks your heart.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be oh so telling about where God's calling you. Not God will use your gifts, he'll use your passions. It's less about I'm passionate about basketball. That doesn't mean I'm going to reach good kids, right? Like I could go to anywhere and be passionate about basketball. Like I'm broken by poverty. That's the thing that drives me. You got to find what breaks your heart. The second thing I would say, like where to start or what to do is man, look who's around you. And like literally, if it's homeless, if it's old folks, if it's the nursing homes, like who is the people directly around you that, man, your heart is beginning to break for, and how do you just help them? Is it a 9 to 5? No, it's a calling. Yeah, it's God's called me to this. I will do this until God says otherwise, and then we'll get into more later about even how to because I do think there are systems that God calls us to put in place to sustain things for the long haul. Yeah. But ultimately, I think, let's go back to like this whole idea of if you're going to live by a different cloth, it's literally going to be because you know what breaks your heart and you're obedient to not just where God's calling you, but who God's calling you to. And I think, God will work out the rest of those details. Yeah. But
I got one last question for you.
All right.
How can I be more vulnerable?
Yeah. I'm going to say this, but I think this is a whole separate conversation. In fact, our next episode, we can go deeper into that one. But that vulnerability piece, the best way I know to be vulnerable, number one is just to do it, but you first got to learn to be honest with yourself. Most people who struggle being vulnerable, it's because they've never had a moment where they could be fully honest with where they are, even with themselves. So they're living a lie to themselves. So it makes sense why they won't be vulnerable to other people, because you've never even been vulnerable to yourself. So, but we'll save that for the next episode. But
man,
yeah.
I don't know if you want to close out.
Thanks for tuning in today to a Different Cloth podcast. Man, check us out all over social media. Like, subscribe, share. And man, thanks. We'll look forward to continuing the conversation in 2 weeks. Holla at your boy.
Peace.